Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, we have famines, lawmakers and fistfights, and of course, the president's son-in-law is under fire for some of his interactions with the Russians. But of course, we're going to first start off with the world's youngest country has a population that is currently facing a food shortage, while the UN is declaring famine in some parts of that same country. Well, the country we're talking about, of course, is South Sudan, and it was thrust into a civil war in 2013, 2 years after its independence. The small town of Bentiu has been ruined by years of war, and 1/3 of all the Sudanese people have been displaced by the violence. Well, since February, the state has been declared to be suffering from famine.
Terrible. Well, the majority of the people in the region have converged on the giant Bentiu refugee camp, which is under the protection of the UN. When people arrive, they are already on the verge of starving to death. Now, one mother who shared her struggles said, "There was nothing left to eat. We were eating water lilies. That's because of this war. Our village was about to be attacked, but we left just before."
Well, Kidiga Okumu, a UNICEF nutritionist, told France 24 regarding the mother and her children. He said, "We have many cases like this." Well, the population is starving due to the war, and the UN estimates that about 100,000 people are starving in Bentiu region. And in only a few years, the Bentiu refugee camp has become the second largest city in the country with 120,000 people living there. And of course, Jeff, 60% of those refugees are minors.
Wow. Seems to be those are the ones that are suffering the most in these wars.
That's right.
Well, did you know that more people have died from opioid overdose than from terrorist attacks? In fact, the opioid deaths are so abundant that in an Ohio city, the local coroner's office had to store the bodies in an off-site refrigerated storage containers because they don't know what to do with all the bodies. Now, Senator Rob Portman of Ohio even said that because of the spike in opioid overdose-related deaths, one township trustee said they can no longer afford to bury people because of the giant increase in opioid overdoses. Wow.
That's tremendous. He continued, "This is a huge challenge for our country. More than 100 people are dying every day, and more people have died in the last 3 years because of overdoses and deaths than died in the Vietnam War." Well, he said this is a significant issue, with this now being the #1 cause of accidental deaths, surpassing even car accidents. And the new drug that's causing even more concern is a synthetic form of opioids, fentanyl and carfentanil, which is 30 to 50 times more powerful than heroin. And most of it comes from China, the senator said. In fact, one of the reports said that one of the synthetic forms of those drugs is 10,000 times more powerful than drug morphine.
Wow. Well, the senator closed by saying that the most effective way to solve this drug issue is in our communities, families, and hearts, because this is an issue that you can't legislate away. Now, also at an upcoming hearing, a legislative proposal called the STOP Act is going to be proposed, and that is to get the U.S. Postal Service to put the same standards in place that private carriers have, because the USPS is the primary way in which these drugs are transported. So they are trying to put some steps there to control that.
That's right. Well, the U.S. military tried to hit a quote-unquote bullet with another bullet, as they compared it, when they recently tested their anti-missile system in an effort to shoot down a long-range intercontinental ballistic missile. Well, this was a mock enemy ICBM fired from the Marshall Islands, and the interceptor missile was fired from an underground missile silo at Vandenberg Air Force Base north of Santa Barbara. Authorities say the interceptor hit its target, and of course, at this time, the stakes couldn't be any higher.
Kingston Reef with the Arms Control Association said, "This is a very critical test for the Pentagon and the Missile Defense Agency because North Korea is working on the development of an ICBM designed to target and hit the U.S." Now, in a little over a decade, only half of the interceptors have hit their targets, and 3 of the previous 4 tests have failed. Now, critics have said that the rushed installation of the interceptors in California and Alaska have resulted in mechanical problems. So not real reliable, but they did have success with this test.
And that must be a part of the reason why a lot of the senators, lawmakers, even U.S. service authorities are not too certain about the U.S.'s capabilities to defend us against an ICBM attack from North Korea.
Right.
In fact, these recent tests by the U.S. come on the heels of a test by the North Korean regime that they've boasted about recently, claiming that it is their newest missile has a new in-flight guidance system to make it more accurate. Well, so far, the North has tested over a dozen missiles this year, and in a recent announcement, Kim Jong-un has said that he's preparing to send a, quote, bigger package to the Yankees. Not even the U.S. Senator John McCain is confident in the U.S.'s ability to counter the North Korean threat.
The senator said, "I don't think that it's acceptable for the United States of America to have an intercontinental ballistic missile or a missile aimed at Australia with a nuclear warhead on it and depend on our ability to counter it with an anti-missile capability."
That's scary. Also, something to consider is, in addition to missile defense, there is a thing called left of launch, which basically are cyber capabilities that are designed to hack North Korea's rocket system. There's also a preemptive attack on North Korea, their missile launch pads, and their missiles themselves. So what, of course, Victor Cha, who made these statements of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, is saying is we have other options at our disposal and wouldn't have to solely rely on the uncertainty of hitting a missile with our interceptor missile, or hitting a bullet with a bullet, or relying on the anti-missile system.
Well, from missiles to minutes of silence, Larry McGee has the latest for us on the recent conference with the Assistant Secretary of State, where tough questions caused the official to pause. Now, he has also been following several other stories for us. Larry, what sort of questions were asked that stumped the Assistant Secretary of State?
The one which caused the famous pause was a question over the criticism that the U.S. has leveled at Iran over proceedings with regard to its elections, though it has been noticeably mute concerning the lack of democratic elections at all in Saudi Arabia. The specific question was whether or not the U.S. believed that democracy served as a buffer against extremism, and how does America characterize Saudi Arabia's commitment to democracy? The assistant's response was somewhat of a dodge, but he offered the statement that the U.S. has made significant progress with the Saudis and its partners in the Gulf Cooperation Council, and both making a strong statement against extremism and putting in place certain measures through the GCC mechanism where the U.S. and its allies can combat terrorism. The U.S. believes one of those threats is Iran, and on his recent trip to Saudi Arabia, President Trump lambasted the old world power for destabilizing the Middle East, while he signed a $110 billion arms deal with the U.S.'s petrol partner, the Saudis. The nations which the U.S. had partnered with in what's being called the Paris Climate Agreement are on edge, waiting to see how the current administration will decide. The question of whether or not the U.S. will pull out of the agreement was posed directly to Secretary Tillerson recently, and the secretary declined to respond. President Trump, however, has tweeted that he will be announcing his decision over the next few days, but there is already a strong buzz behind the scenes that the president intends to exit from the agreement. Commentators say that that decision would essentially be a slap in the face to certain U.S. allies and scientists, but it was in fact one of the promises made by the president during his campaign days. The incumbent leader's daughter is actually a supporter of the agreement and is reported to have created a means by which the president can lend an ear to both sides of the debate, but top officials in President Trump's cabinet state that they still cannot say whether or not the president believes that human activity is contributing to global warming. Things heated up at the Texas legislature recently during deliberations concerning a new sanctuary cities bill. There's reportedly so much animosity related to the bill that the lawmaker responsible for crafting it has had to be placed under protection. Hispanic officials say that at the root of the conflict is actually profiling, but the ultimate result was a brawl on the House floor that one person rightfully called an embarrassment. The chaotic scene unfolded as the Department of Safety officials attempted to clear out hundreds of protesters who had all gathered to oppose the bill. One of the signs allegedly held by one protester stated, "I am illegal and here to stay." That reportedly caught the attention of State Representative Matt Rinaldi, who allegedly called ICE. And when he notified State Representative Ramon Romero of as much, he reportedly physically assaulted him. Others who were present say that Mr. Rinaldi issued threats himself, but he says that those comments were only promises to defend himself if he were attacked. Representatives from among the protesters say that while pushing and shoving isn't acceptable and they're sorry that it happened, their excuse for violence is that they believe that the state official was asking for it, and he picked the wrong group of people to do it to, and on the wrong day. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Wow, that's sad to see that those who are responsible for making our laws are actually acting lawless themselves.
Absolutely.
Well, Air Force One flew more than 15,000 miles over 9 days as the president made his first trip overseas. The American president met with dozens of world leaders, making stops in Saudi Arabia, Israel, Belgium, and Italy. Now, during his trip, he met with Pope Francis and attended both the NATO and G7 summits.
Well, he began his trip with a visit to the Saudi Kingdom in Riyadh, discussing terrorism and trade. Now, Trump signed a $110 billion arms deal with King Salman and received pledges of counterterrorism support from the kingdom.
Now, on the third and fourth days of his trip, President Trump met with Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife in Jerusalem, and then went on to Bethlehem, where he urged the leaders of the Palestinian authorities, Mahmoud Abbas, to continue taking steps towards a peace agreement with Israel.
As we spoke about in our last broadcast, the president also met with Pope Francis at the Vatican and had several bilateral meetings with the president and prime minister of Italy. Well, from Italy, he flew to Belgium, the headquarters of the European Union, where he attended a meeting with NATO leaders. Now, it was there the president pushed America's military allies to increase their own spending on defense, saying that the U.S. wants to be treated fairly.
Well, Trump's last meeting was held in Taormina, Sicily, at the 43rd G7 summit. While the White House declared the summit unbelievably successful, those in attendance were less excited. Some diplomats in attendance told CBS News President Trump was in a listening mode, but had very little to say.
Of course, he was the only foreign leader at the G7 summit who had not committed to the 2015 Paris Climate Change Agreement. The president tweeted while on his trip, "I will make my final decision on the Paris Accord next week." And Katan, we've seen how Trump's administration is deeply divided about this accord. So that actually, the accord which limits the greenhouse gas emissions, so it's really uncertain which way he's going to go.
Guess we'll have to wait and see. America's closest allies, which include Japan, Germany, Canada, France, Italy, and the UK, all issued an official statement to the media saying the U.S. is, quote, not in a position to join the consensus. Well, that was frustrating to some leaders like German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who described the discussion as, quote, she said, very difficult, if not to say very dissatisfying.
Well, before he headed back to the States, President Trump made one final stop at an airbase in Sicily to visit troops and declare his first trip abroad a victory. Speaking to American and Allied service members and their families, President Trump said, "I think we hit a home run, no matter where we are." He also stated, as a result of the trip, we're going to have a lot of strength and a lot of peace.
While President Trump's travels seem to strengthen ties with Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the Muslim world, some European relationships seem to be weakening, especially between the U.S. and Germany. Though the White House press secretary Sean Spicer says the two leaders get along very well, Trump and Merkel are telling a whole different story.
Well, after the G7 summit, German Chancellor Angela Merkel warned Europe to take its fate into its own hands, saying the time when we could depend on others is over. And by others, she clearly meant the United States.
Now, President Trump got her message loud and clear, threatening a trade war in retaliation via Twitter. We have a massive trade deficit with Germany, plus they, speaking of Germany, pay far less than they should on NATO and military, he said. Very bad for U.S. This will change, Trump tweeted.
But Merkel isn't backing down, and in another statement, she said that, quote, while relations with the U.S. are important, it may not be the reliable partner it once was. Now, Germany does have a trade deficit with the U.S., but it is the fifth largest trading partner, trading more than $150 billion worth annually since 2012. But Merkel is looking at new trade deals with other countries such as India and China.
The German chancellor is also in the middle of an election campaign, and even though Trump is very unpopular with Germans, many are seriously concerned this growing rift between them, of course, what they were considered once strong allies. Well, they're wondering how this is going to develop over the next few months.
Well, the president is experiencing turmoil of another kind since returning to the White House. Trump's own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, is in the spotlight at the House Intelligence Committee as he's being investigating him for possibly tying or trying to establish a backdoor line of communication with Russian leaders.
Interesting. Kushner held meetings with Ambassador Sergei Kislyak and the head of the state-owned Russian bank, Sergei Gorkov, during the transition period before Trump was sworn into office. Mr. Gorkov was trained by Russia's top spy agency and is known to be close to Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Well, in a statement to the New York Times, Mr. Trump defended Kushner, saying, Jared is doing a great job for the country. I have total confidence in him. Perhaps more importantly, he is a very good person. Well, Secretary of Homeland Security John Kelly said he isn't aware of any Kushner backdoor channel, but didn't think it unusual. Now, Secretary Kelly told CBS's Meet the Press, I think anytime you can open lines of communication with anyone, whether they're good friends or not so good friends, is a smart thing to do.
Sure. Well, Republican Senator John McCain disagrees and told reporters, my view of it is, I don't like it. I don't think it's standard procedure prior to the inauguration of a president of the United States by someone who is not in an appointed position. Well, Jared Kushner led the planning for the president's first trip overseas, which Trump has called a success, but Kushner's character is now under attack.
But the search for answers on the Russian probe goes beyond Jared Kushner. As part of its Russian investigation, the House Intelligence Committee wants to speak with over 24 people. Among those on the list, Michael Cohen, the president's longtime personal attorney.
Interesting. Cohen refused to cooperate, writing in a statement, there has not been a single witness, document, or piece of evidence linking me to this fake Russian conspiracy, he said. He added the requests for information were, quote, poorly phrased and overly broad.
The House Intelligence Committee has also contacted Morris Epstein, a senior advisor in Trump's presidential campaign. Now, Epstein only worked for a short time at the White House. Epstein's attorney called the request voluntary and added that his client had not been subpoenaed.
Both the House and Senate investigations are running side by side with the investigation headed up by former FBI Director Robert Mueller. That inquiry is the one focused on Jared Kushner, and according to former U.S. Official Kisley told Moscow, Kushner wanted to set up a secure line of communication with senior Kremlin officials.
But Kushner did not originally disclose these meetings on his security application. Now, the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, points out that the fact that Kushner didn't share this information makes people wonder if they were trying to conceal it from the Obama administration, and of course, if so, why conceal it?
Right. The former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has reportedly agreed to turn over some documents to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Flynn, yet another major player in its investigation, initially refused to comply with the committee's subpoenas.
Well, I guess, Catan, it'll be interesting to see what they find from their investigations.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, it's evident that there is a total lack of trust among the nations today. Problems are rampant wherever you turn, from starvation due to war to nuclear weapons in hands of men who want to show that they're the most powerful. And while some have intentions to bring about peace, they have no answers. Well, there is one man who can help them. Yisrael Hawkins has been making plans to bring peace to this entire world for over 40 years. If you're interested in what you can do for yourself, your family, your community, or even your nation, then contact the House of Yahweh today. And when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can also call them at 1-800-613-9494 or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, and www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit our website at www.ypnnews.com. And to email the House of Yahweh, you can simply email them at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the best resource to studying your Holy Scriptures on the internet and really in the world, the Yisrael Says program and the Ask Yisrael program. Both of those are free, and you can find them by going to www.yisraelsays.com and www.askyisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another exciting message from Yisrael Hawkins that you're certainly not going to want to miss. Well, from all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Catan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.